everyone, and welcome back to the Coaching in the Workplace conference. My name is Marada Dokia. I am the Director of Digital Learning and Events with the Association for Coaching and an Executive Coach. I'm so pleased to host this session with Maya Huchan, author of Saving Face, How to Preserve Dignity and Build Trust. Welcome, Maya. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Well, have been looking forward to the session. And as you know, that we are going to be talking about this concept of saving face, how to preserve dignity and build trust. And this is a topic that's so important, that as I was an executive coach that I have worked with leaders around the world, and I have shared this concept with leaders and resonate with them at all levels across different cultural backgrounds and also various industries. I can't wait to share that with you. And also, this is particularly helpful for executive coaches and leadership coaches in terms of how to use the concept to build trust and work with your clients.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maya, again for being with us. Before we start, just a few things about Maya. Maya Huchan is the president of Global Leadership Associates, an international management consulting firm based in San Diego, California. Since founding the firm in 1992, she has built a reputation for excellence in executive coaching, global leadership, and cross-cultural management. Maya's new book, Saving Face, How to Preserve Dignity and Build Trust, was released just this month in June 2020. She's the co-author of Global Leadership, The Next Generation, recommended by Harvard Business School Working Knowledge. She's also a contributing author of 10 business books. Among numerous awards, Maya was named one of the top 8 global solutions thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50. Thank you so much, Maya, for being with us today. And why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about your journey that led you to write your latest book?
I'll be happy to. As an executive coach, I have worked with leaders around the world in the last almost 30 years. And as I noticed that, as I listened to the leaders sharing their frustrations, their challenges, and also their success stories, that I've learned that there was one concept that is so essential to their leadership, but it's also counterintuitive sometimes. And it is the concept of face. So what happened was that face, it is a universal concept, even and way beyond its origin in Asia. And when the concept of face permeates really all levels of social and business interactions. And it speaks to a common human desire to be accepted and respected. So when you hear this term, it's not about money. The real issue is often about face. Often that leaders told me that they have issues with engaging their teams or optimize their performance. And there was interpersonal conflict going on, or there was a certain conflict that's happening among the team members. When we think there was also various communication gaps that's happening in their day-to-day interactions. And when you look deeper, you'd really dig deeper into those issues. Very often has nothing to do with the compensation. That has a lot to do with how people treat each other and how they feel they're being treated. So my hope is that this book, Saving Face, How to Preserve Dignity and Build Trust, will serve as a catalyst for all forms of communications, and not just for business leaders, but also for anyone who would like to improve their communication with their clients, or teachers with students, or parents with their children, or simply among friends and communities. I think this is something that can be helpful to all different kinds of social and business contexts.
Absolutely. When you set the stage in your book, you say, building authentic and lasting human relations may be the most important calling for leaders in this century. I agree. So what makes that ability so critical at this time?
We live in a challenging time. It's a time that's unprecedented. As you can see all the news headlines that, around the world, that has a lot to do with how people are interacting and treating each other. So my hope is that in this world that we live in today, that leaders are experiencing a lot of new challenges. What I can think of, the top three is, number one, we're working more and more with people with diverse backgrounds, okay? And people may have different cultural backgrounds, different ideas, and different perspectives. And so as leaders, we work with people around geography, around cultural time zones, thinking style, personalities, and religions. So how do we really make that connection with people and to be able to break down barriers and build authentic, lasting relationship? And that is the number one challenge that I think that we're experiencing. Number two is that leaders have shared with me that, as you know, currently with the pandemic, we are working remotely for most of the time. And so this is a trend that's been going on for a while, not just because of the pandemic, but of course, as we continue to work remotely, that leaders would not have the opportunity to build relationship face-to-face and see people in person. So then how do you utilize the technology to continue to be effective in connecting with people and continue to engage with their teams? That's the second biggest challenge that we're facing right now. And then thirdly, but not last, is that social media, right? Now we are using social media in almost daily, and how it is so easy for us to offend or insult somebody without the normal check and balance. So what happened is that we have sometimes that people will send or post messages and informations without thinking, what is the impact on the other person or other people or in the community or society at large? And this can cause a lot of unnecessary conflict. So with those current situation we're dealing with, I feel like the concept of face is so back, and then start to really think about what the leaders should be doing and thinking, and to have that awareness about the impact that our actions and words may have on others, and how can we then prevent some of the unnecessary or unwanted conflict from happening, and then really produce and create a positive relationship for everyone involved. That's really the reason that I wrote this book, is wanted to hopefully help create more of a positive society at large.
Yes, exactly. So I was just about to ask, what is face? What is behind the concept of face? If you'd like to introduce that.
Absolutely. So now, what is face, right? So here's the simple definition. Face represents a person's self-esteem, self-worth, identity, reputation, status, pride, and dignity. Okay, so if you look at those words, it's really about your whole person, right? It's about who you are, and it's about how you think of yourself, and also has to do with how others perceive you. So it's inside and out. So when we think about face, it really represent your entire person. And then and it has a lot to do with how we see ourselves and how others see us. And so when we think about face, I like to use this metaphor of social currency, right? So what I mean by that is that imagine that you have met someone, and that you started a new relationship, right? And you wanted to make some deposit. You wanted to establish a rapport with someone. And so, imagine there is a bank account of face. That imagine how you build a supply of face by continuously making that deposit. Okay, and then so what you do is that you build trust, and then we express appreciation, and we show gratitude, we compliment them, and we show empathy, and we provide, we recognize their contributions, and we grant the credit and dignity to the person that's involved. And also we put ourselves in their position to understand their challenges and where they're coming from. And we give people the equal time and weight. So when we think about making that deposit continuously, is that we slowly, surely building up this bank account of faith. Now, so when we need to make a withdrawal someday, and we're careful not to cause someone to lose faith, and we provide feedback in a way that serves, that saves face and preserve dignity. Okay, and if we mistakenly cause someone to lose face, the relationship can still be saved if there are enough deposits in the bank account to cover the withdrawal. So that's what I say, that faith is the X factor in all relationships, be it professional or personal. It's the social currency of our time.
So what do you mean by honoring faith, losing faith and saving faith?
Yes, so there are 3 key concepts of faith. Okay, now let's start by talking about the first one, honoring faith. So honoring faith means that actions taken to show respect, admiration, and preserve dignity of others. Okay, and so when we think about honoring faith, it's literally kind of making that deposit into the account of faith. And when we think about making that deposit, it's not a rocket science. And those are actions that we can take, and many of us probably already are doing them on a daily basis. For example, that you can honor faith by simply listen to someone, okay, and give their voice equal time and weight. And you acknowledge their contribution, and you provide positive recognition to them. You build trust of your team members, and you respect their hierarchy, respect their age, depending on the culture backgrounds, that the status could be important for certain cultural backgrounds, and you certainly value their opinions. And you assign greater responsibility, and you add visibility to your team members. And you also ask them sometimes to teach, to coach others, or even mentor other people. So as you can see, there are many ways that we can honor faith, and we can continue to make that deposit on our daily basis. Essentially, we're sending a message to the other person that I see you, I hear you, you matter to me. Okay, and now there is a Gallup found that only 30% of the US employees think their opinions matter at work. On the other hand, what that means is that 70% actually don't feel their opinion matters at work. So very often when if people don't feel they're being valued or being heard, and then essentially they lose face. They don't feel they're being appreciated. Okay, yeah, and this not only impacts their performance, but also affect loyalty to the organization and also how much they contribute in the daily basis at their work. So honoring faith is essentially a way for leaders and also for team members to show and grant respect for each other on a daily basis. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou was that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel. And so that's the first step to really show that you honor their faith, is by making those small deposits day to day, day by day, and then to continue to build up that bank account. Now, so the next concept has to do with losing faith, and that's something we wanted to avoid. Okay, so losing faith describes conditions where people ultimately feel devalued, humiliated, or unappreciated. Okay, so losing faith occurs when something or someone provokes shame, fear, vulnerability, and a wide range of negative emotions in an individual or group. Okay, Okay, so you see the picture here on the screen here that it's a glass that spilled water, right? So when I was growing up in Taiwan, that I have heard from my teachers and parents that often share with me this 1,000-year-old proverb. It says that spilled water is hard to regain. And that's what this Chinese proverb says, 覆水难收. So spilled water is hard to regain. What that means is that imagine that you accidentally knock over a glass of water on your table and the glass fell all over the floor. How hard is it to get it all back into the glass? Pretty tough, right? It's nearly impossible. Now, even if you manage to put some back into the glass, do you still want to drink it? Probably not. So this saying is a way to teach us that when we accidentally, unintentionally have said or done something that to perhaps damage the situation or relationship, it is hard to fix it. So we wanted to be careful and cautious to start with, to be mindful and intentional about what we do and say, particularly if you're a leader, and always consider the impact of your actions. So because once you spill the water, it's never going to be the same, right? And then even you try to get it back, things will be changed to a certain extent. So now with that, I wanted to share with you a study that by McKinsey talking about respect and job performance. Those are directly related. Now, they have studied 800 managers and employees across 17 industries. 47% of those who were treated poorly deliberately decreased their time spent at work. 38% said they intentionally decreased the quality of their work. 66% admitted their performance have declined. 78% said that their commitment to the organization had declined. So when we think about the impact of people feeling like being respected or disrespected, has a direct impact on their job performance, and of course, direct impact on the bottom line of the company, of the organization. So this is something that I think for all of us to be mindful about is that how can we really create this respectful environment at work so that we can not only create a positive environment for people to work in, but also ultimately it's good for the business. It's good for everyone. It's winning all the way around. Now, so the last concept has to do with saving face. So saving face is the authentic and intentional act of turning around a situation to prevent the loss of respect or dignity for all parties involved for a positive outcome. Okay, and so I want to share a quick story with you about a leader that, let's just call her Linda. Now, Linda was a team leader for a software company. It's a global organization, and she has been continuously promoted to a leadership position. And she used this platform called Slack to communicate with her virtual global multicultural teams on a daily basis. And so she would use it to disseminate information, to assign tasks to her team members, and also she used it to give feedback to her team members. Now, she prided herself of being highly effective and efficient, and as also being transparent. So as she started using Slack more and more to work with her team, she started to notice that the team performance has been declining, and then the team members are disengaged. And then also people are not forthcoming about sharing their ideas. And she asked me, when she and I met and I became her executive coach, we started to investigate what's going on. As you may know that I have done a number of interviews with her key stakeholders on her team. And what I've discovered was that the way that she shared information, particularly providing feedback, that those critical feedbacks was being seen by everybody on the team. So not only the person who received the feedback felt humiliated, embarrassed, and feeling being attacked, but also everybody else read those feedback. In their mind, they were thinking, "Oh gosh, I feel bad for that guy, and I don't want to be the next person being criticized on Slack." So then people start to hold back. They don't share their ideas, they don't take risk, and they're not fully engaged. So they start to mistrust each other, and particularly with the leader. So the performance has been impacted in a negative way. And she unintentionally created a fear-based culture that people are not feeling comfortable and safe to share. So then when we discovered that was the root cause of the problem, and she started to make some concerted effort to change the way she communicates. Now, so she took the critical feedback offline, and then she then started to provide more positive recognition online with the whole team. And it took her 6 months to turn things around, to really rebuild that culture of trust and mutual respect. And then as soon as she started doing that consistently, that the team culture started to change. But it didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. So as we see this, it's a good example of when she caused people to lose face, that it takes a long time to actually rebuild that face back. And so when we think about we're being efficient, ultimately that is going to take a lot more time for us to regain those kind of team performance that we were hoping to achieve. That's why I think saving face and and honoring face is so essential for team leadership.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that story. That puts everything in perspective so easily. So tell us a little bit about how do you build that culture of trust and how that affects face.
Absolutely. You know, there is so when we think about building cultural agility and a culture of trust, I'd like to share with you a definition of cultural agility. Now, one of the things that I have noticed as I coach leaders is that we're working, whether you're working with a local team or working with cross-cultural, global, or virtual teams, that we have to continuously consider the cultural differences, okay? Because our workforce is becoming more and more diverse. And so the leaders must be able to develop this cultural agility to have the ability to manage a situation from both a business and cultural perspective to achieve positive results in a way that works effectively within the cultural context, okay? So when we think about cultural, it's not just national culture. That could be people, a different culture from different generations, okay? And it could be a culture from either different genders or different communities within the same country. So developing this cultural agility is really the key for leaders to continue to be flexible and adaptable so that you'll be able to communicate and connect effectively with different people with diverse backgrounds. So now in the book, I have a couple different models. So one of the models here is a simple model called AAA model. And as you can see, the AAA represents 3 different, it's an acronym and represent different stages of the thinking style to help you develop cultural agility. The first A is aware. Okay? Now, what I mean by that is that we must be aware of our own assumptions, our own behaviors, and even our own bias, okay? And then so to have that self-awareness is so critical, and then so that you know what kind of a value system you have and then where you're coming from. Now, the second A represent acquire. So acquire it's more outward focused. Acquire meaning that you seek to understand where the other person's coming from. and understand their frame of reference. And then also to seek to understand and then put yourself in their position to really appreciate their perspective. So that's the second A. And then the third A is adapt. So then once we have the awareness and then we also acquire information about the other person's perspective, then we're going to adapt our actions and our behaviors for that situation that's appropriate. So let me give you a quick example of this leader that I was working with. Let's just call him John. Okay, so John wrote an email and to his employee, his team member that in a different country. Now, this employee is from a country that English is not his first language. Okay, and then John is American, so he wrote this email to the employee and asking him to accomplish a task by a certain date. And a few hours later, after he sent the email, he received the email reply back from this employee. And the email has 2 words, no way. He was not pleased when he saw that email, right? You can imagine. And then in fact, not only he was not pleased, he was almost angry. He thought, wow, that was rude. That's very disrespectful. I'm your boss. How dare you say that to me? No way, right? And then so he started writing the email back. And then after he finished his email, before he hit send, he read through the email again. He realized that the email came across as very angry, and certainly was not the tone was quite negative. So then he kind of took a deep breath and then thought about this employee has been working with him for a year, and he's very hardworking, diligent, and is always respectful. And so he was wondering, why would he write an email saying no way? Well, you know, so before he sent this angry email back, he decided he's going to pick up a phone and talk to him to find out what happened. So he picked up a phone and talked to the employee and asked him, well, tell me a little bit about what's going on. Why did you send this email back about this task I asked you to do? So this employee was very apologetic. He said to John that I'm so sorry that the deadline you gave me for this project, I had 2 other deadlines on the same week. And then he went on and explained in detail about the other 2 deadlines, what he was working on. And then John heard it and listened to it and said, okay, well, that makes sense. That's okay. I understand. That's okay. We can postpone this deadline. But why didn't you explain that in the email? And then the employee said, well, you know, boss, this is so complicated. As you know, English is not my first language. So it would take me a couple hours just to write that email to explain the situation. So I thought I'm going to just tell you no way, because I'm learning English and I wanted to, and I've watched American TVs and movies. People use no way all the time. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to talk like American people talk, you know, just be direct and efficient. And then so that's why I put down no way. Not realizing that it's offensive to actually use this American slang, right? So John realized, he learned, okay, I understand now where he was coming from. So then he was able to explain to his employee about the meaning of no way. And also they worked out a new deadline for the project. And then they both had a good laugh about it, right? So that was an example of how you use AAA model. It's that, first of all, that, you know, John was self-aware. He was angry, and then he stepped back, and then he looked at this email and realized that this is not a productive way, and I come across as very angry. And he's self-aware about, I made certain assumptions. And then he acquired information by picking up the phone and talking to the employee and try to understand his perspective. And then once he understood that, then he adapted, right? He changed his behavior, he adapted the deadline, and then create a win-win situation. Can you imagine that if he had not done that, not picking up the phone, and then just send that email out, this can really hurt the relationship between him and his employees, cause both sides to lose face, and the damage can be much greater than the actual incident. So, so that was something that I often like to recommend to my client, is that when you lose somebody, cause someone to lose face, a lot of time it's unintentional, that we don't even know it, because in certain behaviors can be completely appropriate in your culture, it can actually be perceived as quite negative from another culture. So that's why we need to develop cultural intelligence as well as agility.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story again. What about psychological safety? How do you create that environment for psychological safety, and why is that important?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So in my book, I talk a lot about psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is directly linked to face, okay, and also has direct impact on team performance. What is psychological safety? According to Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School, she defines psychological safety as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So psychological safety is a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. Okay, and so that is psychological safety. Now, what happens when people don't feel safe? Okay, and both physically or psychologically. Now, when we don't feel safe, we typically either fight back or we run away to avoid the situation altogether, or we freeze. And when people freeze up, and this is actually one of the most common reactions when people don't feel safe, is that they do nothing. They freeze and they duck, and they don't say much, and they remain silent, and they become disengaged. Okay, and so they focus on protecting themselves, and rather than trying to solve the problems. So when people don't feel safe, that those reactions are typically not productive. So what happens when people do feel safe? What happened then is that they are more relaxed, they're more energized, and they also feel their voices being heard, and people laugh more when they feel safe, and they also feel they belong rather than not just trying to fit in. And they also feel accepted, respected, and also valued. And when they feel that way, they show up differently, and they actually have a very different behaviors. What happened was that they're more free to express their thoughts and their feelings, and they're more engaged. They also tend to trust people more, and they're taking more moderate risk, and they're more creative. Right? They start thinking outside the box, and then they also feel more empowered to take actions. And most importantly, when people feel safe, they focus on collective goals and problems prevention rather than self-protection. Okay? And so as you can see, that psychological safety has a direct impact on people's job performance and also the team work. A few years ago, that Google did a team study around the world, studied, I believe was 160 teams at Google, and tried to find out what are some of the key factors to make a team perform well, to make a team great. And they have identified one key factor, and that really it differentiates team from an average team to a great team. And that factor is psychological safety. Okay. And then so when we think about psychological safety, there are two key behaviors that really make a difference. Number one is they call conversation turn-taking. And it's how the team communicate with each other. When people come together as a team and everyone feel that they have the equal time to share their ideas, and not one or two people dominating the meeting. And they also, at the end of the meeting, everyone felt that they have said what they wanted to say, and they don't hold back. So that's the first one related to psychological safety, is how they communicate. And they say what they want to say without fearing being punished or embarrassed. Now, the second factor has to do with empathy. And it's that the high-performing team, they tend to have a high social sensitivity. They pay attention to other team members. What is their reaction? What is their verbal or nonverbal cues? Does this person seem uncomfortable? And have I said something that caused any kind of discomfort with other team members? And so they have this empathy as well as a high level of communication. If you have those two factors combined, you have created a psychologically safe environment, and the team naturally will perform better. Okay, and so when we and then those are directly related to how we honor face, and then also how we prevent people from losing face. And then if situations that could be a bit risky, and we actually think of ways to save face, so then we can still preserve that dignity, yet we also still hold people accountable and being able to communicate in a straight way. Okay, so as we think about, let me share a quick story with you about saving face. Now, I have a client that his name is, let's just call him Jeff. Okay, so this is actually one of my favorite stories about saving face. So Jeff is the financial director of a global bank. And he was facing a big crisis. What happened was, under his watch, a frontline employee had stolen over $100,000 in an 8-month period. As financial director, Jeff had designed and deployed the entire cash flow system that allowed this employee to commit this fraud undetected. It was a high-profile case, and it was discussed not only in security meetings, but also spread quickly throughout the company. Jeff felt entirely responsible for this and also personally victimized. It was an example of losing face big time. So very soon, the company's COO planned a meeting with Jeff and his team. The stress consumed Jeff. He lost weight. He couldn't sleep. And he even developed this rash all over his face. So for days, that Jeff felt like a dead man walking. Now, when the day finally arrived, the team and Jeff waited nervously in the conference room. The COO walked in, and he broke the tension with one sentence. He said, "I don't care about the theft." He continued by saying that theft is unavoidable, whether one runs a hot dog stand or a multinational company. The company was insured and would be made whole. I only want to know that you plan to review this process and fix it. And you seem well on your way from what I can see. So Jeff's demeanor completely changed and brightened. And Jeff and his team, for the rest of the meeting, focused on problem solving and moving forward. And Jeff returned to his job with renewed energy. The COO has saved his face. So now, how did the COO do it? Right, let's take a look at this. So he created psychological safety. Yet, at the same time, he was holding Jeff accountable for this problem. He didn't let him off the hook. It was still something for him to fix. And the COO was kind and firm. He chose his words carefully. And he showed humility and emotional intelligence when dealing with this emotionally delicate situation. He helped Jeff overcome shame and embarrassment quickly and refocus his energy on solving the problems and moving forward. He sent a clear message. I trust you. I have confidence in you to do the right thing. And that's saving face.
Thank you for that, Maya. So how do leaders create a culture of psychological safety?
Yes, absolutely. I think that, as we, as executive coaches, that we work with leaders to be, as effective as possible in creating a culture and also build strong teams. So there are ways that we can absolutely do in their daily interaction with the team. And then I wanted to share with you, there are 3 different communication approaches, but then there is one that's particularly effective. So the first one I call straight talk. Okay, so straight talk is that you would deliver your message to the right person at the right time, at the right place. Okay, and you do so respectfully, clearly, and accurately. So that's what we call straight talk. And when you do straight talk, that both parties involved are clear about your expectations. And also the speaker as well as the receiver feel respected. And so you'll be able to develop a productive approach going forward. Now, the second approach I call blunt talk. So blunt talk is that you wanted to get it off your chest. Whatever you wanted to say, you want to get off your chest. You want to get back at that person because you're frustrated. Okay, and perhaps that you have built up this negative emotion that you just had enough, so that you wanted to get this off your chest, and then you don't really care about, is this the right time? Is this the right place? Or am I even talking to the right person? And that you also don't carefully consider, is this respectful? Is this clear? Is this accurate, what I'm saying? Okay, so blunt talk very often can create very negative reactions from the other person, because the other person tend to feel being attacked or criticized. And they tend to either shut down or they build up the wall. Okay, so it's unlikely that they're actually going to be able to open to your suggestions about how to move forward and actually make the positive change. So blunt talk certainly is not effective, and then most likely you cause someone to lose face. The third approach I call safe talk. So safe talk is the opposite of blunt talk. What happened is that sometimes we're so careful that we dance around the issue, that we are dropping hints, but we never actually get to the point about what the real issue is. And so by doing that, the other person may or may not get the message. And then so they walk away not knowing what you want. And also it's not clear about what the problem is. And then so it'll be very difficult for them to actually do something to fix it. So safe talk certainly is ineffective. And so is blunt talk. So as leaders that we want to, and in fact, as coach, we also wanted to keep that in mind, is that when we work with our clients, what is our approach? Are we doing straight talk, blunt talk, or safe talk? And a lot of times when I work with clients, that they don't realize that they may think they're doing straight talk, but then they can come across either blunt or safe. So it would be helpful to get feedback from the receiver to make sure that you're on the same page. Now, so how can leaders create a psychological safety for their team? I have 3 quick suggestions. Number 1 is that lead by example. And you need to be the first one to show humility and vulnerability. And you don't have to have all the answers. And in fact, if you're wrong, admit you're wrong. And that's how you create this no blame, speak up cultural, that people feel safe to be able to share their ideas and to know that if I made a mistake, it's okay to admit it as long as we learn from it and we move forward. So lead by example is number one. Secondly, is that it's not the leader's job to do this. It really needs to involve everyone. So the leaders need to get everybody involved to demonstrate inclusive behaviors. And also, if anyone, not just the leader, if you notice that people are being left out or perhaps not being treated equally, that we need to speak up and hold each other accountable to create this inclusive culture of the team. And thirdly is to master the art of honoring and saving face. Use straight talk and continue to balance the psychological safety and accountability. And it's important to know that saving face is not being weak. Saving face is a hard skill. It's a soft skill that's hard to master. And so for us to be able to continue to balance building the psychological safety and accountability so that we can truly create a psychological safe environment that everybody can flourish.
Thank you very much for that, Maya. One of the things that come to mind is how can executive coaches help their clients and their leaders to create the right environment in order to save face and to keep that type of culture of the psychological safety and the culture of trust, the cultural agility. How can we support our clients through all this?
That's a great question. I would highly recommend that as we do the assessment with when we're starting the coaching assignment, to have a clear sense from the stakeholder interviews to understand that how does the leader show up day to day, okay? And dig much deeper into what is the cultural of the team and what is the leader's behaviors that actually impact the team performance, and what are some of the key relationships that the leaders have with their key stakeholders? Are they positive, or there's room for improvement? If there are gaps, what is missing? So as we do the assessment to continue to identify those gaps, to be able to share with the leader about those perceptions out there, and in the same time, help the leader build up their emotional intelligence and then to be conscious about the impact of their behaviors and how that can unintentionally that create negative relationship or the teamwork. Now, and to help them identify specific behaviors that they can do to change those relationships, to continue to rebuild the trust and preserve dignity. I have seen leaders, once they realize that their behaviors could be negative, impacting their relationship, and then once they put focus on it, and things can change dramatically. But what it takes is, number one, is to have that awareness. Back to the AAA model, right? They need to be aware. And once they're aware, they also need to seek to understand what's really going on from other people's perspective. And then number three is most important, is to adapt their behaviors and also mindset, so then they can continuously building up that bank account of faith.
Absolutely. We are now living in even more special times, as everyone is working virtually more than ever before, and some of the companies have had to work remotely, to have their employees working remotely. So obviously that entire communication, the straight talks, are even more difficult because you're all the time behind a screen as opposed to being face to face. So what do you recommend? How can we support leaders to face those challenges? The virtual world.
The virtual world, yes. You know, I would say that take the time to connect with your employees, and not just having your regular staff meetings once a week with the whole group, but really take the time to reach out to them one-on-one. okay? And leaders that have done that have definitely seen some positive outcome. When you connect with people one-on-one, that also think about, beyond just talk about your work project or tasks that they need to be performed. Just check in with people and trying to figure out how they're doing, ask some questions and just listen. One of the recent studies that was done by John Spence, study CEOs and survey CEOs to find out about how can leaders really create a positive work environment, particularly virtually during crisis. And one of the key themes that came out of those survey is about empathy. So when we think about connecting with people, think about what you can do to demonstrate empathy. And then, so I like to say that you wanted to think like a CEO, but instead of chief executive officer, it is chief emotional officer. So when you tune in with people's emotion and then they feel respected, appreciated, and valued, then they work hard and they're much more committed. And overall, at the end of the day, that the business and the team and you as a leader and also the employee, everybody benefits. And it has to start from the leaders.
So good. So keeping that context of remote working, I'm thinking, how do you create that culture of trust with the remote team to ensure the highest performance?
That's a great question. And I think that given the current global pandemic situations that leaders have to work increasingly remotely with their teams. So I have 3 suggestions. Number 1 is that get off autopilot. Right? So as leaders, that we need to be able to realize that this is not business as usual. Okay? And so the way that we used to operate when we can see people face to face or be able to have a conversation over the water cooler, it's no longer there. So then how can we be more effective in connecting with people is that to be able to pay attention. I like to utilize this concept of that, just really know your audience and know your group and then make that connection. And then when you're running virtual meetings, whether it's on Zoom or on conference, regular telephone conference, pay attention to who is not really sharing or engaged. And why are they particularly quiet? And bring them in, invite them to share their thoughts, and make sure that you kind of you communicate clearly and not leaving anybody out. And also avoid using some of the slangs and idioms that make it confusing to people. Like, for example, I have, if some of the team members are not native English speakers, that the leaders make sure that you don't use some of the slangs like that can be confusing, such as, oh, we just hit a home run, or it's a catch-22 situation. He's tied up right now. It's a piece of cake. Those are some of the phrases that can be very confusing to non-native speakers or US speakers that can be confusing as well. So know your audience and get off the autopilot and to be particularly paying attention to who are on my team and what can I do to bring them in and continue to make sure that my communication is clear and is being understood. And if people are not contributing, what can I do to bring them in so then they can continue to contribute and feel they belong and not just fitting in. So that's number 1, is get off the autopilot. Number 2 is to raise your human antenna. What I mean by that is that if you remember that in the old days when we had those radios, the radios has an antenna. You have to actually raise it to get a lot of signals. What happens if the antenna is down? We hear nothing. Or sometimes we can hear kind of static, right? So the message is not clear. Now, if we raise the antenna, then we get a lot of signals from 360 degrees. And then we can hear the music, we can hear the conversation on the radio. It's much more clear about what's going on. So now the same thing here is that to think about, we have a human antenna on our head. If we raise that human antenna and to start paying attention to what's happening with the team, and make sure that everybody taking turn to have a conversation, and what does the silence mean in my team members, and what are some of the behaviors or actions or their facial expressions, what's going through their mind. And then if you can also have the one-on-one connections with your team members, in addition to the team setting to communicate with the whole team, so that you can tune into their work situation. When people work from home, that they have a lot of additional challenges that they have to overcome. In addition to technical challenges, they may have young children at home, they may have issues that they have to take care of that can add a lot more distractions. So that to raise your human antenna is to really kind of have a better understanding of what is going on with your workers, so you can better support them, and also you'll be able to engage them a lot more. So that's the second piece. Now, third suggestion is to apply the AAA model that we talked about earlier: aware, acquire, and adapt. So you think before you act, and don't overuse email or any other technology to simply communicate that through writing. Because the real human connection should be made in multiple different ways. And then you don't ever want to underestimate the when you talk to people directly, and to be able to make that connection. And then so apply that AAA model will be the third suggestion I have. So get off the autopilot and raise your human antenna and apply AAA model, and continue to build that culture of trust with your team.
Thank you, Maya. That's great tips, and thank you for sharing that. I imagine there are many more tips in your books. I see the cover of it on the screen right now. So how can people get in touch with you and learn more?
It's easy to get in touch with me. Go to my website. It's www.mayahuchan.com, and you can send me a message. And so that's how you can find me. And of course, through social media, that you'll be able to connect with me as well. And then if you're interested to have a copy of the book, you can also, it's available now on Amazon.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much, Maya. It was a real pleasure to listen to you, and thank you for being with us at the conference.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.